Okay, good morning all. Hopefully you can all hear me. My name is Professor Dragan Ilic. I'm from the School of Public Health and Preventive Medicine. So I'm going to be starting our next session. I believe there was an issue with Professor Holger Schönemann and the session beforehand, but I'm sure that the conference organisers will provide an update shortly. As I mentioned, my name's Dragan. I'm from the School of Public Health, which is in Melbourne, Australia. So normally I would be in Australia, which would be probably late night there at the moment. But I'm fortunate to be currently over in Germany. So good morning to all of my colleagues here in Europe. Good afternoon, I think, to my folks across North America, and good evening to those of you who may be in the Southern Hemisphere through Australasia and Africa as well. So this session, I've devised it to be as interactive as we possibly can, given that we're looking at online EBHC resource development. The one thing that I really want to encourage you all is to use the chat functions. And also use the Q&A function that is available, because I think one of the great things about online presentations is we want to try and make them as interactive as possible and not lose that synchronous component to it. And I think it would be kind of hypocritical from my perspective if for the next 90 odd minutes all I did was just sit down and talk to you about how to design online content, particularly given that most of us over the last couple of years, one way or another, have been innovative in pivoting, I guess, to online teaching. For a lot of us, whether you've been teaching EBHC to an undergraduate cohort, to a postgraduate cohort, whether it's medical doctors, allied health professionals, whether it's public health students, health sciences students, we've all been in the same boat where we've needed to pivot our teaching from face-to-face to online, and have all faced challenges in terms of how to best recreate that face-to-face and potentially that small group learning activity in an online environment. So hopefully we'll be able to replicate that and use each other as a bit of a community of practice in order to further ourselves as educators in evidence-based healthcare. So the first thing that I'm going to do, and I'm just going to stop sharing for the moment, because like I said, what I'm really keen on doing is sharing the tools that I've used, but also looking to gain your experiences with online learning as well. So the first thing that I'm going to do is ask everyone, if you would so indulge me, to participate in this particular poll. So hopefully you can see this screen now, and there should be a hyperlink up the top that you can see. So if you can go to poll, so POLLEV.com, and then / in this case it's my name, so Dragan Ilic 403, and we're keen to see where our audience is coming from. It's a neat way, and hopefully you'll see some of these tools that I'm using, how you can potentially use them in your teaching as well. So we'll see how we're going. If are people able to get onto pollev.com? we'll give everyone a minute or so, and hopefully we'll start to see some action online. Here we go. Thank you for those first couple of people who have been so kind to drop their pins. So we've got, and we got a couple more coming through now. We've got some more. So we've got obviously a great contingent from Saudi. It'll be interesting to see whether we have any others across the board as well. So we'll give everyone maybe another 30 odd seconds, because what I'm going to do is utilize this particular tool with our workshop and to see how interactive we can be, particularly with the challenges of online forum. Oh, we've got our first one up the top from Scandinavia. So we'll give it another 10 or so seconds and then we'll move on. Okay, I've got a comment there, can't find the poll. So what I'll do in our next one, I'll pop it in the chat as well. So thanks to you who have been doing that poll. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to go to the next poll, which if you just bear with me for one moment. I'll pop it in the chat so everyone should be able to access this now. So if you can type that into your URL, and we'll do our next poll. And so I'll share this shortly. And so this is another version using the same software, Poll Everywhere, to again try and find a way in which we can let's pin myself there, and I'll move myself out of the way. A really useful way of trying to get that interactive component with online teaching, but by using tools that are freely available. So this particular tool is freely available. It's Poll Everywhere, so pollev.com, and you're able to create your own polls as you've seen that we've done. So the first one was a bit of fun, hopefully, just sort of gathering, a bit of an ice-breaking activity to see where people are from. This is another example using, I guess, an MCQ type of format to see. In this case, from my perspective, I was really interested to see, okay, well, we're running this workshop. What is the level of experience of participants on the call today? So it's really interesting to see that. We're sort of still jumping up and down, but almost 2/3 of participants, it looks like, have been teaching less than 5 years, which is really interesting from my point of view, because that can obviously help me in real time focus where we're going to go with in terms of the presentation. As I've just said that, we seem to have come off as fairly equal. So I might see how we go moving forward. Okay, so I might just give it another minute or so, or maybe not a minute, another 30 seconds, and then we'll move on to the next poll. I can't believe this. I think even if I tried to create a poll where the outcome was equal in terms of responses. I don't think that I could have done this. So no outcome assessment or detection bias here, I promise. And apologies for my very geeky jokes as well. Okay, so that was really, really useful. Like I said, a really useful activity, hopefully that you guys can see in terms of finding background information in terms of your audience as well. The last one that I'm going to share before I move on is what we call the word cloud. So again, same type of application using Poll Everywhere, but now we're asking you more of a qualitative question, and again, really useful from my perspective as an educator to see where your strengths, where your opportunities lie, and how we can then tailor the teaching moving forward. So we've got this question here. What is your biggest challenge when teaching evidence-based healthcare? So if you wouldn't mind, maybe just popping in your responses, and hopefully we'll get a few over the next minute or so, and we'll be able to see how the word cloud develops. And just as I say that, like magic, we're starting to get our word cloud. So for those of you not familiar with word clouds, the more common responses obviously will be centered and will appear larger. So it's really interesting to sort of look at these responses that I'm getting. Resourcing seems to be quite a big challenge. Reactive resources as well. Reluctance. So really interesting. I'll keep it going, and then I'll open it up for discussion, hopefully, as we go along. So we'll give it another 30 or so seconds to see how we go. So this is really great. We're really starting to hopefully see the value of some of these tools. I mean, I think some of the times, we're walking a tight, I guess, tightrope of using these tools and not appearing to be too gimmicky in their use. But I think we're seeing how useful they can be. So audience seems to be a big issue. So what I might do is, for those who have typed in audience, I think that I can pop you on as speaking. I think my colleagues will help me out. But does anyone want to elaborate on why you've chosen audience? If you put your hand up, and then I'll try and see if we can provide you with access to speaking. So I've got Prof. Kadri here. Mohammed, can you hear me? Are we able to allow the participants to speak? Can we turn their microphones on if they wish to?
Yeah, if anyone want to speak, he just need to raise his hand.
Yep. So we've got Prof. Kadri. Are you happy to explain why you maybe have written audience?
Prof. Kadri, you can open your mic. You are allowed to speak.
Well, maybe that was my mistake. We've got Abdullah El-Zahrani, who's got their hand up. Abdullah, would you like to comment?
Yes, hi. Thank you for having me in this great activities. I think this is an artifact, because I think this is the program which is doing this statistics. I mean, it's counting the words that comes in the phrases people are writing, the the textbooks to submit. And I think every phrase contains the two words, audience and the students. So
Yep.
I believe ignoring those two words and concentrating on the others might give a better idea about the obstacles and challenges with the education.
Yep. So from your perspective, if I can ask, what's your biggest challenge?
Yeah, I wrote exactly the phrase I wrote is the making the audience attentive and reactive.
Yes.
This is what I wrote. And I guess so many people wrote audience in their phrases and students as well. So that's why the audience and students is becoming, bold and presenting.
Excellent. Thank you for that insight. And look, I totally agree. I think one of the biggest challenges, regardless of whether it's online learning or face-to-face learning, is having that student engagement. And hopefully, we'll be able to share those experiences. I mean, one of the biggest challenges that I've personally faced when we had to flip to online learning was really knowing whether or not my students are engaged. I'm not sure if a lot of you also had this issue, but we're actually going through Zoom. We're using webinar, but quite often for our teaching, we would use Zoom meetings. And so everyone's got, their own cameras and the ability to be switched on. But I would say that for 98% of the time, me as an educator speaking to anywhere from 10 to 500 people, I would see the majority of time black or cameras that were turned off. So knowing whether or not I'm actually engaging with my students online was a particular issue. So using tools like Poll Everywhere was a nice way of I guess letting me know that yes, even though they haven't got their cameras on, we still do have that some level of engagement with the students. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint presentation. So just bear with me whilst I get it up and running, and we'll move on to the next aspect. So as I mentioned, we've used this. Basically, I've used this as a bit of an icebreaker activity, trying to get to know you a little bit more, trying to give you a bit of a taste in terms of maybe what the session is going to look like. I would be hypocritical, I guess, if I didn't provide learning outcomes or learning objectives for this particular session. So as a good educator, what I want to do is hopefully be able to get through the following aspects. Describe different types of or different methods of teaching online with respect to evidence-based healthcare. Look at different tools that we can potentially use and tools that, from my perspective, are free. So there's no point me using something that's going to have a subscription to it. I don't think that's worthwhile, and it doesn't really help us as a community of educators. So I'm fairly confident everything that I've been showing you in terms of Poll Everywhere, but all of the other ones that I will show you are also freely available regardless of where you are in the world. And then the final thing that I wanted to do is almost look at, how do we create a structure for online learning? Some of you may be familiar with what I'm just showing at the moment. This is a particular teaching plan that I use for our evidence-based healthcare program pre-COVID. So just to provide you with a bit of background, our medical program at Monash University has 500 medical students. 350 of those medical students are based in Australia, and 150 of those students are based in Malaysia. Prior to the pandemic, we taught all of them face-to-face in small groups of about 15 students. So you can imagine 500 divided by 15 means that we had quite a lot of tutorials that we had to get through the same content. And the biggest challenge that faced us pre-pandemic was ensuring that there was parity in terms of the teaching and the quality of teaching across units, whether they be across Australia, across Malaysia, or within each country. So what was really, really useful for us was developing this teaching plan, having a plan that no matter who you are, no matter what your background, you would be able to pop into a program, pop into a weekly session, and basically be able to follow this plan in order to get those learning outcomes across for our students. In there, we had a combination of what we would call blended learning. So that is, some didactic teaching, so similar to what I'm doing now, some self-directed learning, whether it be asking students to complete exercises by themselves or view YouTube clips. And then that was followed up by some interactive, or what we call active learning from a small group perspective. Obviously, COVID came along, things changed, and we needed to adapt. So again, I'm going to stop sharing there for the time being, and what I'm going to do is now go to a new program, and so I will share my screen. And so I've introduced you to Poll Everywhere. Now we're going to introduce you to another online tool that we quite often use, which is called Mentimeter. So I'll pop the address in the chat. So if you go to www.menti.com, you can access the website, and then you'll be asked to pop in a particular code. And I've popped that one in the chat as well. So hopefully everyone can see that. And what we're doing is asking a particular question. And again, I'd like to use this as a bit of a discussion point in terms of what type of mode or what teaching style do you feel most comfortable with when teaching evidence-based healthcare? Is it lectures? Is it small group work, face-to-face group work, or have you become more accustomed now to teaching via Zoom? Do you prefer utilizing other versions of teaching, whether they be self-directed or whatnot? So we'll give everyone hopefully a few minutes to log on, and thank you for our first respondent who has indicated small group work. So I'll be quiet for the next maybe 30 seconds, allow you to concentrate and choose which mode of teaching do you most feel comfortable with respect to evidence-based healthcare. Thanks, Abdullah. Wouldn't it be better if we could multi-select? It would be, and apologies, it's an error on my point. I didn't tick that box where you could allow multi-selections, but I've kind of also done it on purpose to see if I'm forcing you in a particular area, where your comfort level is at. But excellent question. So it seems like those that have responded, we've got a really good indication of small group work or face-to-face. Can I ask anyone who's indicated small group work, if you'd like to tell us why you prefer that method of teaching, if you could put your hand up and we'll give you the live mic. Now we've got our first, so Garda and then Bada. So can we give Garda the open mic? Oh, there we go. You should be able to turn your mic on now, Garda.
Hi, Dragan.
Hey, thank you.
Nice to see you since last night, I guess.
Yes.
I think the small group will give the educator a chance to make sure that everybody is getting the point, take them step by step, reflect on some of the things that the group did not understand. Just because when you are in a big group or large group or Zoom, whether that face-to-face or online or without the camera, it's just like you lose your audience. And I find the face-to-face is more challenging maybe to the educator, but it's more focused on the learner. So that's why I like the face-to-face.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Gada. Anyone else want to add why they like face-to-face? I know we've got in the chat Reem Al-Khani and Sumaya Chapra have also indicated that they like small group teaching. Anyone else want to add why they prefer that small group? Professor Lubna, I think you've got the mic now. You should be able to.
Yeah.
Yep, there we go. Go for it.
I'm enjoying this very much. I think I will change my mind now because I've changed the small group because it's usually interactive and you can tell, you can adjust the pace of teaching. But now you're convincing me that it is possible to do it even without face-to-face communication. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Lubna. Okay, well, it's great to get that feedback. I'm just looking at some of the chat. So Sarsan, though we in focus, yeah, it's much easier to see whether or not people are focused or not when you're dealing with small group work as opposed to you know, the larger lectures as well. So I'll stop sharing that for the moment and I'll go back to my apologies. I'll just go back to my PowerPoint. Okay. Well, one other question that I've got, I don't think I've got it as a Mentimeter, but I was hoping to have it. Let me just see if I can I'll run through it, but I'll come back to it. So in terms of online learning, so hopefully over the next remaining part of this specific workshop, we can see that we've got different types of online learning available to us. A couple of terms that I'm going to use, synchronous and asynchronous learning. So synchronous learning being defined as exactly what we're doing now. We're on an online environment, but we're online at the same time, able to interact and have these conversations. Asynchronous, I think we had one person in the Mentimeter poll that mentioned that they liked that sort of static, if I can call it static, learning and teaching online. So whether or not you use learning management systems such as Moodle or Canvas or Blackboard, utilizing, I guess, the online chat function is a great example of asynchronous learning where you can have a particular activity. So even a pseudo PBL where you can open it up at the start of the week, people can make comment and they have that flexibility of seeing what other people think. Then they can contribute, and so you have this natural progression of a group chat, which is a great example of asynchronous learning. What we had at Monash prior to the pandemic, almost as a precursor, is what we call blended or flipped learning. And I think quite a lot of us in the EBHC community were already doing this. So rather than having live lectures where our students, whether they be undergraduate or postgraduate, come to a lecture and listen to the so-called expert speak on a topic for an hour or whatnot. We've progressed to this blended or flipped model where we record our lectures online and students are expected to view that material prior to coming to more of that small group activity as well. And as doing so, we've also seen a lot of the emphasis, particularly with blended learning and flipped learning, shifted back to the learner. So they've got quite a number of opportunities to, I guess, lead their own learning and be quite self-directed in their learning, but also open up the opportunity, even if they don't know it, through these online discussions of really sort of networking and learning that, in some instances, teamwork approach to learning. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions, no more polls from me, but I was just going to do it as a bit of a group chat. Really interested to see, prior to the pandemic, how you taught EBHC. And again, if you wouldn't mind popping your hands up, and we'll open up the mic, because I'd really love to see and get a sense of what we were doing pre-pandemic, and see how that shifted during and post-pandemic as well. So if anyone's brave enough, I promise I don't bite, even if my name is Dragan. Fantastic. Shafqat, thank you so much. I think you've got the mic now.
Thank you very much for giving me a chance. Actually, we never thought before this pandemic that we will be able to teach these evidence-based things to the students and our. So this pandemic, there was a illness, but it gives us a good chance to develop this system. Now, I agree with you that many of the things you can always teach online and you can use them. But definitely before, we were all doing this small group were considered to be the best one. And the lectures we were doing maybe in our morning meeting, something in the hospital we were doing. But now we have learned that this method, these webinars, these are equally effective.
Yep. Fantastic. Thank you, Shafqat. I might ask if I can, and Garda, I don't mean to stick on you, but you've mentioned journal clubs. Has anyone else, or how were people using journal clubs, or were people using journal clubs commonly prior? We've got Nadia with her hand up. Nadia, can we give Nadia the mic, please?
Thank you for giving me a chance to speak.
Thanks,
Most of the evidence-based teaching, usually we are doing it through journal clubs, where we take the journals and critically appraise it according to the type of that magazine. And this is usually the way we are teaching our juniors the evidence-based medicine, and it was face-to-face before, and through the pandemic, we were doing it through Zoom. So we continue doing the teaching this way. So usually journal clubs rather than anything else. And sometimes we have very small condensed courses for our juniors, just to introduce them to the evidence-based era.
Fantastic. And I like the point you raised about journal clubs. I'll come to it. And we had a really great session, well, for me, very late last night or early this morning, with Professor Gordon Guyett and Paul Glaziou, Lau Albuquerque, Indy Dice, and David Noonan, just about what should we be teaching in our evidence-based healthcare program. So if you weren't able to see that, I believe there will be a recording. So really interesting from that point of view. So follow up, it seems like, we were doing that lecture, small group work, journal clubs. How were you forced to pivot online? What was the greatest, I guess, challenge? And I'll use the third item that I've got there as well. What was the greatest challenge moving from face-to-face to an online perspective during the pandemic? And knowing now what we know, I guess, of having to teach online for the last at least 2 years, what do you wish you had known before we needed to move online? What do you wish you had in your toolkit, so to speak? So again, if you can let me know if you're willing to share your experience, if you can pop your hand up, and we'll give you the open mic. So really keen to see how, I guess, the challenges that you were faced with, and how you overcome them in terms of flipping things online. Anyone wishing to? Wishing to share what their greatest challenge was? So Reem's popped in the chat. Biggest challenge was finding out whether or not the audience was concentrating or not. Exactly that. Professor Lubna, thanks again. You've got your hand up. Can we give Professor Lubna the mic, please? There we go.
Well, it came all of a sudden, so we were not prepared even to know how to use the online platform. So we had a learning curve to go through this. But again, the knowing that whether people are on the same page or not. And then we have a habit here that it became like the norm, although it's not supposed to, that people don't put the camera on at all. And they find it easier just to put their picture or put nothing. So you really don't know whom you are talking to and what they are doing. Are they engaged with you or not? So it has been, I keep telling them I want the camera on, and then they probably have 1/3 of the student would be doing so. Maybe because they are worried, I'm going to reduce their marks or something. But again, the norm, the culture somehow did not encourage people to put their cameras on, although things have changed a lot in the society. But I mean, that part of interaction was difficult to overcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, look, it's definitely something I particularly struggled with. I think we had what we called in Australia, and I'd be interested to see what others had, but almost this maybe excitement is the wrong word, but going online, it was novel. We were trying new technologies. The students were definitely happy to give us room for making mistakes. They knew what we were trying to do wasn't going to be perfect, but they certainly went with it. One of the interesting things that we did see, particularly with Melbourne, I think we were the city that was placed in lockdown the longest in the world. So we had pretty much a year and a half of our university students not being able to come to campus, so everything was taught online. And we certainly did notice a fair degree of what we called Zoom fatigue. So whilst it was fairly novel to begin with. Oh, sorry, we've just got some, well, it was fairly novel to begin with. We certainly did notice that level of Zoom fatigue. Anyone else would want to share their experiences? Reem, if it's all right, would you be willing to share your experience? You've posted it on the chat, and I'd really love to explore it. You said you use written and verbal discussion and particular exercises to test your students' understanding. All good, Professor Lubna. Okay. Anyone else wish to share their experiences? Otherwise, we'll move on. So I'm just giving a few moments because I realize that I might be a little bit delayed with my bandwidth. Nope. Okay, we'll move on then. So, oops. So, one of the tools that I found really useful, and I'm going to pop this on in the group chat shortly, is what we call Jamboard. And so all this requires is a Google account. And so if you don't have one, you know, you can still create one in order to create this Jamboard. But essentially, it's very similar to the whiteboard that we can use in Zoom. So if you just bear with me for 1 minute. And I will pop this in the chat. So hopefully, I think this is going to work well. Hopefully, if you just click on that link, you will be able to go to a particular Jamboard. So I'll just leave it for maybe another 10 or so seconds so people can access that link in the group chat. So if you just click on it, you'll be able to get access to, I'm just going to share it now. So just bear with me for 1 moment. You should be able to get access to this screen here. So I think we've got people that can access it. And so the question, let me go back to what my question was in terms of using Jamboard. So what instruments or how did you go about using different tools for online learning? So I'll just highlight how we can utilize Jamboard. So we can use a pen, so you can write your response. Let's see if I can undo it. The one that I find most useful here on the left-hand side is the sticky note. So the sticky note can come up, and I can, you know, type in online quiz, pop it down, and there I've got my sticky note. So what I'd ask you in the audience is if you can go to the sticky note option, click and add your responses. I'd be really keen to see how we can populate and utilize what tools you used when you had to transfer to an online learning platform. So I'll give everyone a few minutes to do that, and the goal here is, yes, contributing, but also being able to have some fun, and hopefully, if this is a new tool, be able to play around with it. So you know, if you want to use the pen function, feel free to do so, have a play around. You should be able to do that. So I'll give everyone a few minutes to have a bit of a play around with it. Feel free, you definitely won't be breaking anything. So how are we going? If oh, I think you need, oh, I apologize, still trying to log in. Okay. Everyone should be able to access that. Are people seeing if they're able to utilize it or not? Yeah, Garda, you're in. So if you can maybe have a shot on the left-hand side, there's a sticky note function. Maybe have a shot at highlighting that and popping on what tools, if any, you used for your transitioning to online learning. it's the beauty of doing things live and not from home in a different country, in a different setting. Sometimes even the best prepared presentations don't work all that well. So we'll give this another 30 seconds and see how we go before we potentially move on. Do let me know if you're having difficulty accessing it, or okay. All right. So trying accessing it, but we can't. So that's okay. So one of the things that you've mentioned right now, Gada, is Kahoot. So what I might do is stop sharing that because it looks like it's not working as it should be working. And what I'm going to do now is hopefully something that most people have been able to use, and that is Kahoot. Okay, thank you, Badir. So it looks like it's in only view mode only. So I'll see if I can maybe rectify that moving forward. But one of the tools, and Garda's already mentioned it, and I'd sort of preloaded this anyway, so as a bit of fun to see how people go. But one of the tools that I've found really useful is Kahoot. So if people aren't familiar with it, Kahoot is a freely available game that you can use to test people's knowledge. So I'm going to ask you to just log in if you can to Kahoot. So Kahoot.it, and then we've got the pin. So if you pop in the pin that's up there on the screen, we should be able to get a little bit of a Kahoot working and try and make things a little bit fun. So if we go with Kahoot IT, and the pin that we're using is 4481. Fantastic. We've got our first entrant. So thank you very much, Zainab, for coming on board. So we'll leave the Jamboard for the moment, but I'll ask you to log in for our Kahoot, which is always fun. So from my perspective, I've tended to use Kahoot, particularly during small group sessions, in order to ensure that the students, where it's been possible for these MCQs, are actually understanding the content that we're trying to teach. A really neat way of checking in with the students, so to speak, and ensuring that we're scaffolding their learning, so we're not losing students as they go through that specific small group activity or even a large group activity. But another way of also ensuring, if we go back to one of my first slides, one of the challenges is seeing whether or not people are engaged with the content. So by having this sort of interactive activity, we can see whether or not people are still with us, whether they're willing to engage, and hopefully they are. So I'll give it maybe another 30 seconds if you wish to participate in this Kahoot. It's only 3 questions. It's just a little bit of fun, but it's designed more so to give those of you who maybe have not previously used Kahoot a bit of an example of how we can use it. Once again, it's totally free, so you're able to access it without any subscriptions or any requirements from that perspective. Okay, so I've got Bud here asking how to use it while students are on Zoom or Blackboard. So so what I try to do is exactly what I'm doing now is I preload it on one of the web browsers and simply share screen. And then that is able to allow us to utilize it in this sort of synchronous activity. I will give you 5 more seconds and then I'll start. Like I said, I think I've only got 3 questions, but it was more so to show how we can use it and the different types of questions that we can use as well. So we'll start and we'll see how we go. Hopefully a little bit of fun as we're going through things. So as you can see, we've got the question up the top. And then we've got our 4 responses, and that's typically the type of MCQ that we utilize in Kahoots. Fantastic. Looks like we've got a very, very smart bunch here. So Sam is right up the top. So we've got true or false options as well. I haven't done the best of questions here. It's supposed to be relative risk, generally speaking, can be assumed to be equivalent to odds ratios. Might be a little bit controversial. Maybe I should have qualified that a little bit more. We'll see what the response is. Oh, see, looks like I was wrong. I think I probably should have qualified that by talking about rare or otherwise. And then we can do polls as well. So here's me being a little bit of a smart aleck. So, which is the best football team in the world? Manchester United, Real Madrid, Paris Saint-Germain, or Juventus? No bias from my perspective, of course. Oh, looks like a lot of you have got good taste. So bit of fun there, but just to try and highlight, I guess, some of the tools that you know I've particularly utilized in online teaching. So we'll continue on. So Jamboard, you know, unfortunately I forgot to hit the edit so everyone could access it, but what I'll do is ensure that post this meeting that you've all got editable access to it, and so you'll be able to play around with it. We haven't got it here because we're working in webinar mode, but one of the things that I've found really useful is using breakout rooms in Zoom meetings, and so we can replicate that small group learning activity by placing people in particular small group rooms, and you know, we can make them as small as we like or as large as we like. So that's been very useful. Polling tools, so using things like Kahoot, Mentimeter, Poll Everywhere. There's other versions that are, excuse me, similar to that. Again, a really useful way of ensuring interaction between yourself as the educator and your students as learners as well. I was going to do another Jamboard because I was really keen, because this was really going to build on what we talked about last night in terms of what are the critical skills that we should be teaching our students with respect to evidence-based practice or evidence-based healthcare. I won't waste time in terms of trying to get that Jamboard up and running, but I will ask if people want to raise their hands or pop in the chat, what do you think are the critical skills that we need to teach our students, our learners, evidence-based healthcare? And how much more challenging is it trying to teach those skills in an online environment? So if anyone wants to pop their hand up or pop it in the chat, what do you think are the critical skills that we need to teach, and how easy or how more challenging is trying to do that in an online environment? anyone willing to? So Shafqat, sorry, you've written OOM is easy and online. I'm not sure. Ah, Zoom. Zoom, yes, yep, definitely. I was also, I guess I was sort of thinking, you know, if we think about, you know, the different steps in EBHC, so, you know, asking an answerable question, searching the literature, critical appraisal, applying the evidence and reflecting upon it. Are all of those aspects easier to teach online, or which have you found the most challenging? Anyone wish to? Do you think it's easier to teach, let's say, Pico online, or is it the same as trying to teach it face to face? Give folks a minute or so if you wish to add. We got a couple through the chat. Nadia. So if we can give Nadia the mic, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So can we give Nadia the microphone, please? There we go. Thank you. Nadia, over to you.
Yeah, hello again. Well, honestly, I thought it's really challenging, but with the right tools, with known the technology and different modules, you prove me wrong. So I think there is a place for such a teaching. Before I was thinking, unless it's a group discussion, the smallest the better. But now with the technology you are showing us, with different modules, I think it's doable.
Well, I'm glad to hear.
Thank you. Thank you very much to open our horizon.
Cheers. Thank you. Anyone else wish to comment? And well, if not, what I'm going to do now is just wrap things up maybe in the next 15 or so minutes, but apologies, I'm going to contradict everything that I've been saying thus far in terms of trying to be interactive and engaging, and try and provide you with a bit of background as to why I've taken the approach that I have today or this morning, depending on where you are, with our workshop. So some of you may already be familiar, and apologies if this is maybe a little bit too theoretical, but just a little bit, just to provide you, I guess, with a bit of background. So some of you may already be familiar with what we call Miller's pyramid in terms of teaching. The easiest way, in which we can assess to see if someone's actually learnt the material is to go on this sort of assessment of if I can get my laser pointer up, this MCQ. So they know the material. The biggest challenge, or the increasing challenge, is then them showing us that they know how to operationalize it. And so as people move from what I like to call that novice to the expert, they're moving from this pyramid of knowing what critical appraisal is, let's say, for example, knowing how to do it, showing you how to do it, but finally, actually doing it in practice. And that's sort of the trajectory that we're trying to do when we're teaching, regardless of it being face-to-face or online. So I'm going to expose myself here to a certain degree and highlight to you what I've actually been doing in our discussion this morning. What I've basically used is an old principle of education, which we've started to use in medical education or health professions education. And that's based on a particular educational theorist, Gagne, who came up with 9 points of what he described as instructional design. And I'll just run through them quickly and then hand over to you for your comment, and then we can look to sort of wrap things up. So the first thing that we want to do in any form of teaching activity, whether it be face-to-face, but particularly online, is gain the attention of the learners. We want to have some sort of structure to our teaching, whether it be face-to-face or online. So the use of learning objectives is obviously useful there. One of the key critical aspects of learning is, particularly from a learner's point of view, is being able to what we call scaffold. So being asked to recall, well, what have you previously learned on this particular topic, or what do you know so far, allows us to sort of adjust our expectations and identify at what level we should be setting the expectations for the following learning activity. Presenting the content, hopefully you've seen that we've tried to be fairly diverse in terms of how we've presented the learning content. I had hoped through the Jamboards to provide that little bit of guidance and that feedback, which is a critical component, which I'll talk about shortly. Getting people engaged. There's nothing better, you know, as the saying goes, getting your hands dirty. So getting in there and actually practicing and doing whatever the teaching and learning experience is. Feedback's essential, and we'll talk shortly about different types of feedback, whether it be summative or formative. There always needs to be, I guess, some form of assessment in terms of assessing performance. But in the larger context, trying to identify, well, what does that assessment need to look like? And then finally, enhancing that retention and transitioning into the next aspect. So I'll run through these 9 elements fairly quickly. So I know we've got a little bit of time still left. One of the key components to any teaching session is breaking down and getting that familiarity or trying to establish that relationship with your learners. We often talk about having a safe learning environment. So hopefully I was able to do that to some degree when I demonstrated Poll Everywhere. I tried using ice-breaking activities. Whereabouts are you in the world? You know, trying to identify, okay, well, what had been your experiences today? It allows me to sort of try and identify how we're going to maneuver, where we're going to set the agenda for the activity. But it also allows, in this case, students, but in this case, you guys being the participants, opportunities to engage with me. And know, well, get a sense of my teaching style and have hopefully a level of comfort that you can interact with me. So that's that first part, which is a really critical part. It's almost like, I often say to my colleagues, it's almost like fishing, you know, you throw your rod in and you're trying to catch something and really sort of, you know, start to have that engagement. One of the great I guess, teaching tips that I've always learned, which has worked fantastically well in a face-to-face environment, but can also work well in an online environment when we use the Zoom breakout rooms, is this notion of think, pair, and share. So, you know, when you know the presenter asks a question, and then asks you to have a conversation with your colleague. So if it's, you know, in a face-to-face setting, usually you turn to the person next to you, have that conversation, and then are able to share it to the wider audience. In an online environment, we can do the same sort of thing where, I can pose a question, we can pop you in Zoom breakout rooms, and you can have that conversation in a smaller group setting. The second part of Gagne's instructional design is informing the learners of the objectives. Quite often, we as educators are so focused on getting through our content, we forget to provide the learners with almost a bit of a roadmap of, if you do engage with me in this particular activity, here's what I promise to deliver by the end. That you should be able to do X, you will be able to recognize Y, and you will be able to implement Z. So giving that roadmap and providing that learning criteria really does make a difference. And one of the big things that we've been using, particularly with online learning, is realizing that we really need to engage with students in terms of designing the content, having that feedback from them telling us, and to be honest, quite brutally, honestly, sometimes, what works well, what doesn't work well, has been a real benefit in terms of co-designing, and for us, continuing on with a lot of the online teaching that we've been doing. One of the clearest things that we've been trying to do is what we call signposting, and that's, putting a particular activity during the online teaching, highlighting that, this is a critical element of this particular lesson, whether it be through a Kahoot, whether it be through a poll, whether it be through something like a Jamboard, but it's that one activity that allows people to focus in on it. So when they do go off and, they go off and the lesson is complete, they can come back to it and they can say, we're in that Kahoot, and in that Kahoot, all of the questions were focused on X, Y, and Z. And so, it provides that sort of signpost or that reflective anchor that people can go back to. Here's a particular signpost. We might have a session that we're talking about Pico and searching PubMed, and so we might again and again post this particular image, and so every time that people see that image, they can see the link between coming up with their Pico and how that integrates in terms of coming up with different synonyms when they're doing their Medline searches. The third part, we talked about recalling students or learners' prior learning, and so by being able to do that, it makes the lesson seem much more achievable. We're not faced with, okay, students, today we're going to be searching Medline, and people thinking, oh, I don't know anything about Medline. I don't know the difference between PubMed or OVED or X or Y or Z. But being able to recall on previous learning activities, so I'll use the example of Pico. They're able to see how Pico relates to searching, and then from that we're able to then provide that link with the next activity. So it's always that sort of what I'll call scaffolding, and which I'll talk about scaffolding shortly as well. So it's really, really important, regardless of whether it's face-to-face or online, to have that continual asking your audience, asking your learners, asking your participants about their previous experience, about their previous knowledge, about their previous learning, so you can build that pathway to the new content that you're delivering. Present the content. So a fairly easy one, but I think it was really great to see everyone participating in terms of the new ways in which we're presenting content. We've definitely moved away from just doing standard lectures, and these days, regardless of whether it's face-to-face or online, we're using a variety of ways of presenting content. For more didactic information. Yes, we can do lectures, we can do presentations, we can record the lectures quite easily via Zoom these days and pop them up as previewing, so to speak. The use of podcasts, but also getting a little bit creative and hopefully having that engagement with the audience. One of the things again that I like to reflect upon is Miller's pyramid, and looking at it from a different point of view, looking at it from how different teaching modalities translate in terms of people translating that knowledge into action. And not surprisingly, the standard lecture that we've had for all these years really isn't all that effective. It's great in the short term, but in terms of embedding behaviors and attitudes and skills in practice, not so great. Similarly with reading and audio visual, not surprisingly, what really does translate is this notion of doing. So it's a little bit, I guess, more challenging with evidence-based healthcare. But I think someone mentioned earlier on the use of journal clubs. So that's a great example of getting your hands dirty, so to speak, and actually practicing those elements of evidence-based healthcare. The best form of teaching and being able to be comfortable with the content is exactly that last component of teaching. If you can teach others, there's always people in the audience that maybe won't understand the way in which you present a particular concept. So the challenge falls to you as an educator to try and present that content in a number of ways. And so if you can present that in a number of ways, obviously your capacity to understand it and practice it also increases. I've talked about scaffolding, so bear with me. I'm going to see if this particular link works. So just bear with me for 1 second, and I'll show you what I mean about scaffolding. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. And bear with me, but hopefully you'll see what I mean by scaffolding and how we relate it to learning. I'll leave it there. You can never beat a cute baby video, as they say. But hopefully it's provided you with a bit of background in terms of and a better understanding of what I mean by scaffolding. We don't learn to walk overnight, and we certainly don't become experts in evidence-based healthcare overnight. So having that ability to scaffold and teach small bits one step at a time that hopefully build upon one another will hopefully allow our learners to feel like yes, they are novices to begin with, but by the end of this particular curriculum or whatnot, they will have learned so much across these small bits that by the end they're actually having some form of expertise, and that's what we mean by scaffolding. There's the very technical, which I won't get into, but for those of you who are interested, you can look up the Zone for Proximal Development, a really fascinating read in terms of how much pushing we should be doing when we're in that learning environment, how much support or how much formative feedback do we give to our learners. As I mentioned, we want to have as much interaction as possible, moving away from that didactic learning. So, typically, whether it's being face-to-face, A plus B equals C, very didactic, as opposed to breaking people up into small groups, which is much more of that which is much more of that active learning. And we can still do that, hopefully we've been able to demonstrate in that online environment by having those online group chats as well. We didn't get a chance to talk about different assessments, and that might be for another time. But there are a number of different assessments, some of them formal, some of them not so formal, that we can use in order to promote learning. I think in my next slide, we'll talk about different types of learning, whether it be learning for assessment, of assessment, or as we're going along through. But don't be, I guess, afraid to be a little bit creative in the different types of assessments you use. I think we've been so rigid and formatted over the years to use, typical things like MCQs and exams, OSCEs to a certain degree, but be comfortable to be creative. Ask students to do an infographic. If we look at the BMJ, they've always got an infographic summarizing the evidence. What a great way of having that as an assessment tool to demonstrate your understanding of EBHC concepts. Similarly, concept maps, other tools as well. I think we've only got a few more minutes, so I'm just going to quickly run through the last couple of slides and open up for questions and discussions if people want moving forward. But feedback's a critical thing, I think, in any type of teaching. We've got different types of feedback that we can have, and I've just written there on that particular slide the various feedbacks in terms of yes, no, or yes, no, with a little bit of understanding in terms of why you've chosen the correct answer or otherwise. But also that notion of peer evaluated feedback, and something that we I don't think we've done well, but I think we're emerging in self-reflection as a practitioner, reflecting upon oneself and saying, okay, well, I'm strong in this particular component, not so strong in this component. So if I look at EBHC, yes, I'm strong in critical appraisal, I can do my risk of bias, but you know what? I'm not actually really strong on the communication aspect, on that shared decision making. So where do I go to improve that component of my EBHC? As I said, different types of learning, and I think this may be my my final slide, or very close to it, and I'll open up for discussion. But different types of learning, and this really just means integrating assessment during that scaffolding process, because like anything in life, whatever you do, you want to have some sort of feedback to know that you're on the right track, because there's no point sort of investing a lot of time thinking that you're doing the right thing when in reality you've turned right off the road and you haven't done it well. So when we talk about assessment for learning, that's what we mean in terms of that formative feedback. Assessment of learning really is that other length of the continuum where we're trying to provide some sort of I guess assessment against those learning outcomes. Yes, you know how to construct a PICO. Yes, you know how to critically appraise and do your risk of bias. Yes, you know how to communicate. So it's really providing more of that formal learning as well. And then finally, that practice component, and I was really pleased, like I said at the start of this session, to hear that people have been using journal clubs in face-to-face sessions, but equally to highlight that it is possible to set up online journal clubs. A very, very effective way. And ironically, when I was looking at some evidence to support this slide, I was able to find it in a journal that I'm one of the editors. But from my point of view, it was ironic because it was pre-pandemic. So obviously, we've been doing this type of work pre-pandemic. Now I think this is an opportunity to shift and to explore different types of teaching and learning. I'm going to leave it there. I think we may have maybe 5 or so minutes for any questions, but firstly, I just wanted to thank Professor Lubna for the opportunity to do this workshop with you. I hope you found it somewhat useful, somewhat enjoyable, and hopefully there's been that element of interaction, because I wanted to share my experiences, but in doing so, I also wanted to learn from your experiences and create that community of practice. So thank you all for the opportunity, and happy to happy to answer any questions that you may have over the next couple of minutes. I'll stop sharing. Thank you. You're giving me wonderful feedback. Thank you so much. Oh, you're making me all blush. I'm just getting thank yous all over the place. Well, I'm glad you've enjoyed the session. Let's see any questions, but like I say, I'm very happy to take conversations offline. Once again, I'll pop my email in the chat. So if you do want to reach out to me, feel free to do so. That's my email address. Very happy to collaborate on all things education, and like I said, I hope you've enjoyed the workshop, learnt some things. I've definitely learnt things from my point of view, and again wish to thank the organisers, particularly Professor Lubna, who's done a wonderful job, as I said in a previous email exchange, in organising such a mammoth and huge conference. I think it's been fantastic. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your time, everyone, and look forward to being able to link up down the track. I think the next session will start maybe in 5 minutes time, so I'll give you an opportunity to have a bit of a break, a refresh, and wish you all the very best for the upcoming presentations. Alrighty, thank you very much all.